everybody. I hope you're all doing well. I miss seeing your faces in person, but these classroom lessons are kind of fun for me. I'm Cassie, the director of Bonanza Education Center. Most of you have probably met me when you came to visit Bonanza in the years past, and if you haven't, nice to meet you. And I want to invite you to head out to Bonanza with your families to explore. It is the best place to social distance. There's lots of trails to hike and things to explore, and the weather has been perfect this fall. I think we should get started with today's virtual Bonanza lesson. So here we go. Many, many years ago, right in the same area that we call home, there was a large mammal that we don't see roaming around here anymore. Can you remember what a mammal is? In case you forgot, a mammal is a critter that has hair, is warm-blooded, they're born alive and they give their babies milk, they're vertebrates, so they have bones through their back, and they breathe air through their lungs. The area we call home was once covered in wide open grasslands and prairies with rolling hills. These prairies did a great job supporting the large herds of the animal that I'm thinking of. The mammal was so important to Native Americans in the plains. In fact, they depended on this animal to survive. This animal provided food, materials for their homes, clothing, household items, tools, and ceremonial objects. Tribes in the area that hunted would move their villages on a regular basis to follow the migrating herds of this critter. Other tribes lived in permanent villages so they could farm the land. These tribes that migrated lived in teepees, and everything inside their homes were light and easily packed up to be pulled by horses. When they needed to move to follow the herds, they'd load up and go. If you've ever visited Bonanza, I may have told you about some of the bones that we found from this animal and showed you one of the huge vertebrae that we have on display that was found up on the Bonanza Prairie. I probably told you about a story of a huge herd of this animal that looked like a black, massive cloud coming up over the hills and the ground trembling as the stampede came through. Is any of this ringing a bell? Go ahead and pause the video and see if you and your class can figure out what critter I'm thinking of. How did you do? Did you decide that the animal that so many Native Americans depended on was the American bison or the buffalo? If you did, you are completely correct. It would be really hard to overestimate the importance of animals, particularly the buffalo or the horse, to Plains Native Americans. In addition to providing food, the bison also had more than 100 uses, and no part of that animal went to waste. In the plains today, Native Americans are working really hard to restore the bison herds to the reservation. The horse was unknown to Native Americans until the Spanish brought it to the Americas in the 16th century. Along with the bison, it rapidly became the center of life on the plains. Before they had horses, the people of the plains hunted and gathered food on foot. Horses allowed them to hunt more effectively. They had more meat and more hides, and they could build and transport bigger teepees. Native Americans knew that their lives depended upon the animal world. They felt a kinship with the animals and showed them great respect. They believed that the animals were helpers and guides. Aside from the meat provided from the bison, Native Americans also survived on what the prairie provided. Berries grew wild in some wooded areas, and there are so many plants that grow naturally on the prairie that provided them with food and medicine as well. When you visited Bonanza, do you remember a flower that looked like this? This is called the purple coneflower or echinacea. The roots of this flower can do some amazing things. When you go to the dentist, do you ever have your mouth numbed up with a shot of Novocaine? Well, before our time, rather than going to the dentist, Native Americans discovered that this plant could be used as a medicine that treats toothaches, sore throats, snake bites, and other types of poisoning. This plant is called the brown-eyed Susan. This one has been known to cure earaches. This one is called wild bergamot or bee balm, and it has tons of uses. It was discovered to treat colds, stomach aches, respiratory illnesses, nosebleeds, headaches, measles, and it can even cure a fever and chills. This is a cool one. This is called the cup plant, and many Native Americans of the Plains culture believed that this species of plant had supernatural powers. They would drink a concoction out of the cup-shaped leaves that came from the stems to purify them before going on a bison hunt. This one is called the blanket flower. The name blanket flower came from the resemblance of the flowers to brightly colored Native American blankets. Many cultures believed that finding this flower was good luck. I am so fascinated by the amazing things that nature can provide, and I could talk about wildflowers for hours, but let's keep moving. Okay. I want you guys to imagine that you're standing on the prairie. So we've got tall grass, rolling hills, and we can see for miles. There can be a few trees. They're only growing along rivers and streams. Imagine the wind blowing across the prairie. I think we all know that too well. Now, think of this idea of what prairies look like. Here's my image of what I think they look like. Now let's add that big mammal into your vision. Do you remember what we were talking about? The American bison. Let's do some thinking. How would you make your home here where the buffalo roam? Okay, let's think about some of the other animals besides the bison that live or have lived on the plains. Everyone is going to get a piece of paper. Teachers, feel free to print out the page from a Google Doc and give them that paper. As a group, let's come up with different animals that live or have once lived on the prairie. Remember that these are animals that we might have right in our own backyards. We'll choose an animal and you're going to draw it out on your piece of paper. While drawing it, I want you to be thinking about certain characteristics that this animal has. Eventually, you're going to need to share with the class the animal, describe it, what it looks like, what it eats, and where it lives. Pause this video to draw the animal, then come back to the next part of the activity. Okay, now that everybody has their animal and has drawn it out, you guys are going to create a story about your animal and tell us why it's important to you. You're not going to tell us the name of the animal. You have to create this story kind of like I did before without telling you that it was the bison. I just hinted that it was a bison. You're going to do the same thing, why it is important to you. So the uses of this animal. Please remember to write really nice as your classmates are going to be reading this. Once your stories are created, put them upside down in a pile in the room and we're going to shuffle them up a little bit. Everybody is going to grab one sheet from the stack and you do not want to grab your own animal. We're going to go around the room and read the animal and why it's important to the artist. Then as a group, we're going to try to decide who that animal is. When the class thinks they've got the right animal based on the reasons why it's important, the artist is going to confirm if the class was right, if that was the animal that they had. They'll tell us what the animal is and describe those characteristics we listed before, what it eats and where it lives. Go ahead and complete the activity as a group. When you're done, unpause the video to answer a few more questions with me to finish up our lesson. I'm back on the screen. That must mean that you have completed the activity and are ready for some of my questions. So as we all know too well, here on the plains we have 4 seasons and one we are approaching quite quickly, winter. How do you think that winters influenced the way that people lived? How did everyone survive? What were some of the natural resources that Earth provided that were available for food, housing, tools, medicine, and other everyday items that they needed? What are some important roles that animals played in the lives of Plains Native Americans? We talked about why the bison was so important to the Native Americans when they roamed the open prairie. Now, what are some animals that are most important to you? Remember how we talked about being part of hunting communities and part of farming communities? Which would you rather live in? Would your responsibilities in these different communities be different than your responsibilities today? Now, my last question. How has the Plains region changed today? What animals and plants are different now than they once were? What is life like today compared to the 16th century? Okay, I hope you can answer some of these questions, and I really hope that you guys learned a little something from me today. Thank you for letting me be a part of your class. Soon enough, we're going to be back in action at the Bonanza Center where I can see your smiling faces. Until then, please come out and visit me at Bonanza in your spare time. The park is open and ready for you to go on an adventure. So we will see you soon. Take care.